welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, Women Beyond 40, a platform for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond. And you can join us at WB40.com. I would also like to shout out to the Alex the Seal podcast, which I'm very proudly a co-host of. You can check it out at all your favourite podcast apps. Before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we record this podcast. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. Today in the podcast, I am very excited to be chatting to an incredibly interesting woman who has spent her life doing pretty amazing stuff. Her name is Jan Latta. Jan is in her 80s, and after decades having an extraordinary career in both advertising and publishing, she actually encountered a huge gorilla which would change the course of her life. Yes, I did say gorilla. Jan has gone on to become one of Australia's most prolific wildlife photographers, and it's taken her around the globe. She has written so many children's books, sharing her incredible images of endangered wildlife and educating kids on why these animals are so important to the world. Jan has recently written a memoir. It is called Doing It My Way, and boy, has she ever been doing it her way. Please welcome to the confessional, Jan Latta.
Hey there! When Sandy's not interviewing kick-ass women, she's hanging out with me at Alex the Seal, a podcast about music and nostalgia. I'm Jo Pybus, and each episode, Sandy and I talk about all the songs that got us hooked up, knocked up, and broken up. Do yourself a favour and search Alex the Seal on your podcast app. Love you, Molly.
Hello, Jan, and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you.
We've been having lots of fun with all of the tech this morning, but we're here. Everything is good. So welcome. First of all, I wanted to say congratulations on your book, which is fabulous. For those who are watching along on video, they'll be able to see this, but we will put all of the links to Jan's book in our show notes. Your incredible book is called Doing It My Way, and boy, are you ever. What an extraordinary career you have had.
I've been very lucky.
So tell us, first of all, I want to say that you had an extraordinary career, first of all, in publishing and advertising. So before we jump into what your true calling and passion was, tell us a little bit about that career.
Well, in advertising, I learned about the glass ceiling. I worked for a big international agency called Lintas, and it was divided into 4 groups, and we each had to come up with a creative solution. My idea was selected, but the managing director at the time said, "Great idea, Jan. I'll get one of the men to do it." And I realized the glass ceiling was a cement block at the time. But over the years, I usually managed to get my own way. There weren't very many women in advertising at the time, and from Lintas Sydney, I went to Lintas London, which I didn't enjoy at all. So I thought maybe I'll go to Canada before I come back to Sydney. And I had an interview with a man, and he said, "Oh my goodness, what do you do?" Because I had to tell him my salary. And he got quite angry, and he said, "You earn more money than me and my son put together. What do you do, draw?" And I said, "Well, I also think." I didn't get the visa. So that...
Oh, Jan, that is absolute gold. I love it. And, it's fascinating. And I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about that part of your career, because you're right. You were such a trailblazer, because in those times when you were working in that field, there were so few women who were A, working in advertising, but B, also making a real mark. And you did both of those things. So you're a pioneer. You led the way for so many other women now who are working in advertising.
Yes, well, I think I was just lucky in that department. But my husband was asked to go to Tokyo to open Y&R competitive agency in Hong Kong. In Japan. And I wasn't allowed to work in Japan. And it was the first time, my life was on standstill. But I learned plate etching, and it was wonderful seeing the linear line of the Japanese art. And then I was asked to go into a TV station called JCTV. And I thought, well, I've been directing commercials in advertising, that this will be fun. And they looked at the blonde with the boobs at the time and thought, no, she's going to be the hostess. So they asked me to host this TV program live. It was terrifying. And of course, I realized the interviewing, and they said, oh, you're going to find the people to interview. So Y&R got all their clients on the show the first time, and then I got into the swing of it and had fashion programs and food programs, and I think it knocked fear out of me for the rest of my life. And when I was publishing the Regent magazine, I often had to meet film stars and famous people. And I was quite relaxed about that, because they were just really nice people. And I had some really lovely encounters with people like Pavarotti and Jeremy Irons and a few people like that.
How fantastic. And Jan, look, you are such an inspiration to me, because I publish an independent Australian magazine called WB40, Women Beyond 40, for women 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 and beyond. And so, what you did in the sort of publishing world as well is quite fascinating to me. Again, at a time where you were trailblazing for other women. I mean, you're such a pioneer in so many fields. It's actually mind-blowing.
Well, when my husband, when Y&R asked my husband to go to Hong Kong and set up a new office there, I joined another competitive agency. And when a lot of my clients' agencies went over to Y&R, I was fired on the spot. First time I've ever been fired. And I thought, well, this is my life. What am I going to do? And then to make matters worse, after being fired, my husband announced that he really wanted to be gay. He wanted to live his life as a gay man. And I thought, well, if I live the marriage, I've just been fired, so I have no job, I have no visa, I have no way to live, and I have no money. But I left the marriage, and I had 3 really poor, terrible years. But Hong Kong had a fascination about it, a vibrancy about it. And I thought I could go back to Sydney and be a highly paid creative director in advertising. But let's see what happens. Eventually, I got a job and a visa. I had this teeny little place to live in. And eventually, I knew the new Regent Hotel in Hong Kong wanted to have a magazine, and I pitched for that. And I had the right to publish it. I joined up with an editor and a production man, so we had a perfect trio for a magazine. And then we set about finding the advertising to afford to print the magazine. But this magazine went to every guest in every region around the world, and it was a great success. And that was followed by Mandarin magazine, And these were just terrific, wonderful, creative years. I traveled worldwide. Then the Hyatt Hotel asked me to travel all over Asia to do creative work for them. And it was just fantastic. And then I lost everything with a Chinese handover. Everything came down like a pack of cards. But I discovered Africa. And Africa is a sort of joy of my life now.
I am always really, doesn't matter how many people I speak to, how many women I have the honor to speak to on this podcast. I'm always blown away by the absolute true resilience of women. And I'm listening to your story to have, walked away from the marriage because in essence, you have no choice. And to, as you say, have to start again financially and in every other way, and then to rebuild yourself and then lose everything again, due to the political dealings that are out of your control. So I guess, why do you think it is that women are so resilient? Before we jump into Africa, because I'm super excited about that, but I'm really interested in your views on why you think women are so resilient. What is it about us, do you think?
We're the mothers of the earth. I mean, I've never had children, but I think women are just so strong, that let's call them the mothers of the earth. I think they can sort of cope with everything much more than men can. There was a great quotation which, during the interview, I'll find on my screen, which describes women perfectly. A little bit of it was, give them food and they'll make a meal. Give them a home and they'll make a family, all that. But when I went back to Sydney, with my tail between my legs and feeling very unhappy that I had lost all those years, and I had to start all over again, I went around pitching myself for creative or magazine work, and I discovered a new word. You're overqualified, which meant I was too old. And okay. And then I just thought for a while, and I thought, I'm going to go back to Africa. And Kalaman, my friend who lived in Africa, organized for me to, when I met him the first time because of the magazine. But this time I went back to see the mountain gorillas in Rwanda. And this was a really dangerous time because the terrible war was just starting. I invited a friend because that's something I thought I shouldn't do alone. And when I had this emotional moment with this big silverback, and I don't know why it happened or how it happened. I always have the hairs on my arms go funny when I even talk about it. But after this, silverback and I exchanged a look, which I wasn't allowed to do or supposed to do. And then the guide said there were only 600 mountain gorillas in the whole world. And I thought that was so sad. And when we came down the mountain, I thought, I've had experience in advertising. I've had experience in publishing. I'm going to start making books for children on endangered animals. And I don't want to use illustrations. I want to show the animal in the wild, in their natural habitat. And that meant I had to learn to be a wildlife photographer. Kalaman was a famous wildlife photographer. And I said, how do I go about this? And he said, don't go to a studio and learn photography. He said, you come back to Africa, you've got to learn in the wild. You're going to know everything about every animal you're going to see. You've got to know everything down to dung. He said, if you see wet dung, it's around the corner.
I love that.
I made a lot of mistakes, but with that one experience with the mountain gorillas, 16 books on endangered animals.
Hello, Sandy here from the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, a platform for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to see the rest of the video, please head over to WB40.com and subscribe to WB40 Extra. By subscribing to WB40 Extra, you're helping to support the hard-won wisdom of incredible women. So thank you. Please remember to like, share and follow.